Hello and welcome back to Recording Principles. This is our final class, week 4, Thursday. So all your graded materials should already be submitted. While they haven't all been graded, they should be in. So nothing that we cover today is going to affect anything you'll be graded on. This is going to be things for you to help you, things you can experiment with on your own projects, maybe things that just plant a seed to get you thinking about things that may be introduced later in the program. Also, I'm open to questions and answers. If you have any general questions or anything about anything, please let me know. One of the first things I want to show today is what they call New York compression, because it's something a lot of people are into or curious about, and kind of got a mythos about it, but it's not a big deal to do, so we'll look at that. It just involves some understanding of routing and signal flow. And if I can make that track a little bigger. All right. Questions box. My screen isn't moving. That's not good. Is my screen, is it just one person? Is everybody else held up? Right now I'm not playing. I'll hit play and see if you can actually see things moving. Yes, I do. Every day. Jeez, listen to all that reverb. Sounds like I was on cold medicine last time when I did this. I think this is one I must have done Monday. Unless it's from some other month, which it could be. It's definitely not a finished version of what I did. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Just audio for demo purposes, but I'm definitely going to dial back that background box reverb. That's better. The bottom screen. I don't know what the bottom screen is for you all. The bottom screen. All right. No bueno. Stand by. Let's switch. All right. Now here's my main screen. You should just see a jumble of stuff in an image of me. Are you able to see this screen and the screen move? All right. All right, so let's go back. All right, how about now? You should be able to see the timer on the clock move next to logic in my recording monitor. Things are working now? Great. It's been an unusual week. Non-stop technical difficulties. No explanation. All right. I've got most people telling me that it's working, so I'm going to assume it's working. Continue on. All right, so New York compression. So New York compression is a method of parallel compression, which was originally popularized in New York some decades ago. So it's usually done on drums. That is kind of its purpose, is a drum compression technique to beef up your drums. So the first thing you're going to need is a drum group like this one. You've learned this all month. So you should not have any problem creating a track stack, summing stack for the drums, right? So you take your drum stack, And then you're going to make a send going to something not in use, which is going to make an aux track. So pick bus 6, it's not used. I'm going to close up all this other stuff so we can actually see bus 6. You can also see it right here over my inspector window. So I can actually see just the bus 6 and then the aux 6 that it feeds, which is also down here. So I'm going to rename this track parallel compression. So you can see probably by now why I didn't show this to you earlier, because it can be a little bit confusing, right? So this is the same aux tracks that were used for time-based effects, but this time we're going to use it in a different way. We're going to use it for parallel processing. So I'm going to take my entire drum group off of drum 6, and I'm going to turn up the send as close to 0 as I can get it.
Every day.
So now I have drums there, drums here. So all I did is make the drums a little bit louder, right? You know this. So this time, instead of adding a time-based effect, I'm going to add a compressor. And all month long, I've been trying to teach you how to use compressors with finesse, make them sound good, make them sound natural, not make it too apparent, not take off too much attack, all that sort of thing to make things sound, you know, basically prettier. Cleaning things up, making them sound better in the mix. This time, we're taking the opposite approach. We are literally going to try to crush this and make it sound as bad as possible. So I'm going to start with a FET compressor because they tend to react really fast, which makes them good for crushing things. I'll start with my standard 4:1 ratio, all the auto stuff off. Fast attack, fast release. So now I've crushed it down so much it's hard to hear. I'm going to turn it up. And remember, right now we're actually hearing both drum tracks. We're hearing this track clean coming out because it's soloed, and then this track, which is a parallel. We can turn this one off and we should just hear the one with compression. I'm going to crank up my ratio even more. Gotta keep that attack time really fast. You don't want peaks coming out because it's going to mess up things for you. You increase the makeup gain so the output's nearly the same as the input. Might increase the ratio even more. More slam. Alright, so it's starting to sound like a bad Led Zeppelin cover band or something, right? You all hearing that? Jose asked, this is Cape Bustelo I'm drinking. No, it is not, but I do strongly support Cape Bustelo. This is actually some French roast from Trader Joe's. But I did live in Miami Beach for a while, so once you live there, you don't leave there without being a fan of Bustelo. Secreto if you're really uppity about it. Alright, so back to the topic. Everybody hears that's really crushed, right? Cool. Now, part of the problem of crushing something like that is that now that I've done it, I've got, let's play again. Or not. Come on. I mean, normally you never want to see that much purple up here, right? That much gain reduction, it's crazy. Now, if you notice, just me talking, I take the compressor off. It's very easy to hear me talking, right? You can hear me talk right through it, no big deal. Put the compressor back on with all that. I'm actually talking louder to compensate. It is much harder, right? I'm having to push my voice to come through that. So that lets me know just right there, there's a problem, going to be a problem, right? There's going to be a problem with the frequencies, and they're going to interfere with our vocals, most importantly, also our keyboards and guitars, because we did that craziness. So the next step to the craziness is to add an EQ after the compressor. And with this EQ, we're going to do what they traditionally call a smiley face. 2 ways to do this. There's the way that I would normally teach you, subtractive EQ like this. Or there's the other way, which is taking the shelves and shelving them up. Or you can do a combination of both to make a really creepy big smiley face. So that's my version of a smile. Aren't I pretty? Let's listen. So that's with the EQ, without. And what I'm hearing here is I made it a little bright up here. That's a little too much. I'm going to back that down. But Professor Hughes, it still sounds like it's in a garbage can. What do we do? Well, that's the point. And so now the idea is that you don't have them even, okay? So, and that's where a lot of people make a mistake when they start trying to do parallel compression. They read about it somewhere or something else. They do it and they just think that it's an even parallel, but it's not. So once you get all that done, you take it all the way down to where you can't hear it anymore. You unsolo everything and you play it back. So there's our mix. And then you ease it in until you hear the drums fatten up.
Every day, and praises people.
And then back it down just a little bit, maybe.
Every day,
So turn the synth off. That's it there.
yes, I do. Every day,
So it's just a little touch. Didn't really add a lot of volume, but it added a thickness to our drums, and it also added the sort of all sorts of kind of artifacts that happen. Because we compressed the entire drum kit, we took out more. We got more room noise coming out, more the mic bleed, more of everything came out of that, and it actually took down the main drum hits and pushed those hits down to where we actually hear more of the noise between the drum hits. And a lot of people argue that this is extremely important, and is also the importance of a good drum room is having that sound between the hits. So this gives us that. It takes away some of the cleanness of the sound and replaces it with a little harder hitting and edge. Okay, so if somebody's like, well, can you get the drums to be a little more edgy? Can you make them feel heavier? This would be a technique that you could use. You only want to use it at the end, because you start with this technique, you start mixing to it, then it ends up being pushed down to the mix to the point where it's not really effective. Or you end up with too much of it, and your ears have become so accustomed to it, to hearing it that way, that you end up with just way too much. So it should be one of the last steps in your mix to do something like this. You want everything else balanced, and then when everything else is balanced, it's just one little decision of how much to push it in. So that's New York compression. The first part was just parallel compression. Adding the smiley face is what gives it the quintessential New York compression sound, which is scooping out that mid-range where our vocals and lead instruments are going to go, so that we have a clean area there while still keeping this impact surrounding it. Is anybody out there with me? I feel like these are coming in not in the right order. What I'm reading doesn't seem to... some of the things coming in seem to be relating to what I said like 15 minutes ago. So I'm kind of curious what's going on here. And then others seem to be current, yeah. All right. So does everybody understand this? Everybody understand the principle? Any questions about New York compression? Cool. Moving on. In the same vein is another technique known as parallel EQ. Sometimes this is done also in conjunction with compression, and was a very popular technique in Motown. So let's go to our vocals. And this time, instead of doing the whole vocal group, this time we want to treat that whole drum kit as just one instrument, right? Just like it was a drum loop or something. This time, I only want to focus on the lead vocal. So say my lead vocal is not cutting through enough. I'm going to do a parallel process for it. So I start off, I make a new bus, going to something that's not used. So there's my bus, there's my SID knob thing. So we call some parallel EQ. And we're going to turn it up just like before.
Give thanks and praises, people. Yes, I do. Every day. I give thanks and praises, people. Yes, I do.
So now I made it a lot louder, right? That's part one. Try to keep that close to 0. You want that to be even. Also, the other thing with this was, notice we actually did move the aux on this. You haven't been allowed to the rest of this because of proper gain staging. The auxes on your effects shouldn't need to be moved. They should be able to live right there. But with this, you actually do use the fader on the aux return. All right, so up here we have an EQ. Now it's probably going to be a bit over most of your heads right now still, and that's all right. But a thing happens when we don't use linear EQs. So any sort of analog EQ, any analog modeled EQ, the more you push it, you start having phase issues around that frequency. And that's just part of the nature of EQing. Sometimes that can actually be desirable, sometimes it's not. But it's something you have to keep in mind. If you have to do extreme EQ, you could be doing some serious damage, especially with boosting. So if that damage sounds good to you, then that might be the right thing to do. Damage isn't always bad, but it's something to always be aware of. In this case, we're going to say that we had this EQ'd well, and you know, if we boosted anything in here, it just wasn't fitting the mix. So we needed to do something else. And here comes our parallel EQ. So we're going to pick what frequencies that we want to push through, and then we're going to try to kind of truncate the other one. So I'm going to pick one of these, and I'm going to move around.
People. Yes, I do. Every day. I give thanks and praises, people.
So this gives us the way up here. It's kind of airy. It makes us feel like it's more present. It gives us the illusion of high fidelity.
I give thanks and praises, people.
That helps it cut through, but it's a little nasally.
Every day.
Down here, it gives us sort of a warm sound, but lo-fi. It sounds like it's coming from an old TV set.
Every day.
So boosting that, it's going to give me a little lo-fi.
I give thanks.
That makes harshness.
Yes, I do.
That makes nasally. That makes air.
Every day.
So
I give thanks.
first off, I know that I don't need anything under there. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that off, make sure nothing's getting boosted there. I'm going to lower this down here. So that was kind of a lot of muddiness. I don't really want to boost that. I definitely wanted to be getting some boost around this 1K. This part, I don't want to boost so much, so I can cut that back down. And then that leaves me with a little bit of air right there. And I can boost that a little more with my shelf if I want a lot more air. Be careful boosting up here. If you do something like this, and I see them, it's going to hurt anybody that has high frequency sensitivity. So when you're boosting these high frequencies, a very little bit goes a long way. So we're going to lower this.
Yes, I do.
So there's our mix.
Every day. I give thanks and praises, people. Yes, I do. Every day. I give thanks and praises.
So let's mute this.
Yes,
there it is. Stop.
Every day. I
It's almost like magic, right? Done that subtly, I would never be able to listen and realize that that was done. But when you take it in and out, you can hear there was a difference in the presence. And that's usually the idea, is to be invisible when working like this. But every little bit adds something, right? All right. What else can I show you? Sidechaining. I haven't shown you any sidechain or keying this month, have I? Cynthia, I do not understand your question. Please elaborate. All right, to demonstrate these other techniques, I'm just going to make a new session. We're just going to do some cheesy electronic stuff with some loops because it'll be easier to hear these techniques. Kind of wish I would have saved that. Too late now. I'll make a few tracks here, a few instrument tracks. You know what? Never mind. I just added a map to my session. I don't want to do it. Forget that Logic just starts putting stuff everywhere as soon as you add one of their instruments. So let's avoid that. I am going to have to do a drummer track though, or something. And you all will learn Ultra Beat and all this stuff coming up in sequencing, so I'm not going to take time to teach it to you. But I'm just setting up something to have some things to work with. And if I'm painfully slow, I apologize. This program MIDI and Logic is not my forte. All right. Let's find a kick. By the way, General MIDI is a protocol, and it kind of means that things like kick tends to be on a C. Very cool. Basic beat. Keep this track. Scan. This time I want some hi-hats. Closed hats. So all I do is just copy the MIDI from the other one. I'm just going to move them around. Those did not land on the grid. All right. Doing so well. Sorry folks, part of the problem is my eyes are not that good. I think that when they do that little thing where they turn the little lens, they're like better or worse, and you can never really tell the difference. I must have guessed wrong on one of those. Now I'm paying for it because I can't see my screen. Alright, call dead mouse, we got a hit. Quick check at the questions box. Stand by. Bobby O did what? Hey, are you able to see each other's comments now? It kind of looks like you're talking to each other. Yes, Cynthia, I did. I just adjusted the faders so the magic happened. That's literally how it works. I know it sounds like a weird thing for a teacher to say, adjust the faders so the magic happens, but you said it, and that's it really is about that. You know, you can mathematically try to tweak things, or you can just listen until everything balances out in a way that sounds kind of magical. All right. So you can't see each other. It's just a coincidence that I just had a whole run of things that all looked like they were talking to each other. It's kind of weird. What's this happen? All right. So let's keep moving forward then. So we got us a little beat here. This is always the hardest part for me because I don't know my logic loops. I don't use them. But I need to find something very thick sounding. I want to do two different things. So I want a bass sound and a pad sound. I actually want a synth bass, but it won't let me do both of those at the same time. So let's try bass. Electronic. Let's try intense. Maybe that means lots of harmonics. That one's pretty good. So to not waste up too much time, let's just do this one. It's not quite what I wanted, but it's pretty good. It's growly. You can hear it. I can add distortion for harmonics if I want. And then I need some sort of synth lead. One that's not too choppy. So not that. Part of my problem is I'm listening to these and a lot of them I hear already done, the effects that I'm going to show you. They already did them to the sample. selection for pads anywhere? Let me see that. Let's try intense. This one's not pretty, but it will do for what I want to show you. Some things, they don't have a lot of harmonics. They're just hard to hear the process. So it can help. I have lots of harmonics. Like in fact, with this one, let's just go ahead and add some distortion to it before we even start. Just add more harmonics. You'll remember from your RPR immersive, that is side effect of driving distortion is you get harmonics. So what's our problem now? First problem I hear, I added all these harmonics to the bass. I can no longer hear my kick drum really. It's being completely drowned out by this. So the way Logic sets up its sidechains is a little bit weird, but I'll show you how they do it. So what we do is we put an effect on the thing that on the sound that we want to change. So in this case, the sound that we want to change is this D&B fog bass. But we don't want to compress it based on its own signal. We want to compress it based on signal coming from our 909 kick drum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bus of this. It's any empty bus. Now, I have to be careful, is when I did that, it made this track right here, and I don't want this track because this is going to give me a double of my sound. Remember that? And this time I don't want that at all, so I'm going to delete this track. I'm going to go over to our mix. And you can turn it down if you don't want to delete it for some reason or change its input, but I'm just going to delete it, and it's gone. So we need the aux, but we don't need that aux track. Did I cancel that somehow, or is it just not deleting? Let's try again, and this time I'll actually read forward and try to read what it asked me. Delete anyway, that's what I want. It's dead. All right, so now I've got an aux track going nowhere. It goes to bus 3, but bus 3 does not arrive anywhere. So right now you hear nothing from that happening. So it's coming off the 909. So that's bus 3 and going crank it up. So you don't really hear anything happening. But up here on the compressor, and the compressor is on this track, remember, on the D&B fog. So on this compressor under sidechain, I'm going to click this drop down and I'm going to choose bus 3. And try an Optos, hear how it sounds. Let's take all this auto stuff off. Just the threshold to hear it. Fast attack. Change our release time. Draw this knee. Have it fast. You may hear the effects being more pronounced with other compressor models. Let's check out our friend, the Studio FET. I like that. Get a much better release sound to it. And the trick with this is to dial in the release time. Use a fast attack and dial in the release time until the bass pumps with your music. So basically, you kind of want that bass to feel like it's pumping on the eighth notes in between the kick drums in a scenario like this. This is doing it in the electro fashion where it's very pronounced. You can do this on like a normal mix, even like a country music mix. If your bass player is causing your kick drum not to punch through, you have a couple options. You can try to change the bass, EQ the bass out. You can try to change up the kick drum and use a different kick drum. If these options aren't available to you, then you have to make them work. And one of the ways is to do something like this. Only if you're trying to be transparent about it and people not notice you do it, you would only want that needle to go down to about 3 to 5. So there's a much more transparent parallel compression. And then this gets that pump. I think this track can still be turned down a little bit. So let's bypass the compressor. That's what we had. I know the low end of that kick drum is probably not coming through for a lot of you, but it really opened up a lot of space on it. I like the release time around there. So remember, important to use your ears when setting up parallel compression. The difference between sounding good and sounding bad is almost always the release time on that. The box. Oh yeah, Chris was talking about the loops on pre-package. You can certainly just throw together a bunch of logic loops with no engineering background, and things will likely work for you for sure. Yes, Cynthia, your definition of parallel processing is exactly what we did. Nice. Logic has a lot of aux tracks, so if you have a lot of them in use, just keep going down the list until you find one open. I don't know what their current limit is. I think it's somewhere in the thousands. Alright, so now we have this techno synth. And now we're going to do something different. On this one, we are going to key the gate. Logic recently changed their gate to say sidechain as well, I believe, but almost always the gate will refer to its sidechain as a key. So same sort of process. The gate's actually going to go on this track. So go to my dynamics and noise gate. And this technique is called the trance gate. You will recognize it when you hear it. And then for the sidechain, I'm going to take my sidechain this time off of my hi-hats, which are this last track down here. So on this one, I've got to make a new bus. Do the bus 4. Be careful, right there it showed me bus 3 was unused because it doesn't see an aux track for it. Logic in trying to oversimplify everything, they kind of miss the boat sometimes. So we're going to turn this up. We're going to delete this extra aux track that it made. If not, we'll have another dry signal over there and it's going to mess up the balance of our mix. Delete anyway. And then I'm just going to use that bus as a sidechain up here. So bus 4. Remember, you have to make the bus before it'll show up here. If you don't have one that exists yet, it won't show up as an option. So you have to start off by making the bus and then add it. You can't make the bus first and this and then create it. And those logic things. So I'm using the hi-hat to trigger my gate on and off. So it's all the way up, I get nothing. With it all the way down, it sounds like this. And I kind of get to shadowy one. And I can adjust my attack and hold times, reset. And the fact is, it doesn't matter what kind of sound you have, that's going to work for those kind of sounds. I'm just looking for something else that's cool. Just going to add that to the same track just as a different example. Just extend this loop out. Extend this loop out. Out the gate. See how much more rhythmic drive that gives us, and it opens up a lot of space in the mix, makes things sound a lot more tighter, a lot more refined. So a lot of cool things you can do with that. And if I want to change the pattern, all I do is change the pattern of this hi-hat. Now I can also use something I'm not even using in this. I can make tracks just to trigger my side chains that I don't even listen to in the mix, which I'll often do in my own work. Pretty cool, huh? Well, Chris, I don't really have a song. I have 3 bars, almost 4 on that part. So, yeah, there's lots of things I could do if I wanted to create this into a song. But I'm trying to show you the technique and not focusing on the song. Watch this. Or not that. So if I change the hi-hat pattern, obviously because of the gate, it's changing the pattern of that other part. Another trick that's been done a lot in the past, modern technology makes it pretty much an obsolete trick. But a lot of times, when people weren't getting enough weight out of their bass drum, what they would do is they would play a low frequency note in the key of the song. So say your song's in G, they play like a low G and your G, and just have that tone underneath the entire track. And then they put a sidechain, they key a gate to the kick drum. So every time the kick drum hits, this tone, which is tuned to the track, hits, and it gives more bottom to the kick drum. Same thing we do with these hi-hats, only it's there to layer in a kick drum sound without having to do all that editing and edit each one to fit where the kick drum hit. That way, whenever the drummer plays a kick, it opens up that deeper tone underneath and fattens up the kick. Cynthia, that's a good question. She's asking, how do you know about volume level? Ultimately, the volume level is handled in mastering. All you really need to care about while in the DAW is how everything sounds relative to each other and making sure you still have headroom at the end of the mix. If it's so low that these meters aren't even moving, then you're not using a lot of digital data. You're going to have low quality audio. But since we're working internally in a 32-bit plus floating point, we don't really have the sound degradation that we used to. So people that taught digital in the very early days back in the 90s, they were very worried about getting just the right levels because you had a audible difference in quality when you're working with everything at like 16-bit. Once you get to 24-bit and then again to 32-bit float internal like we do now, it is you just have so much quality range to work with. It doesn't really matter. And so the ultimately is just how the mix sounds to itself. And then the mastering guy is the person that goes through and tries to make sure that that mix is going to sit in the radio at the same volume as other mixes on that same radio station sort of thing, or on the CD with everything else in your album. depending on if you're mastering for a single or for an album or whatever. But that's all the domain of mastering. So while you're mixing, you shouldn't worry about how the loudness sounds compared to everything else, because generally in the mastering stage, you might get anywhere from 3 to 12 dB of loudness added, depending on how harshly they're mastering it. I always just got another quick question. How much headroom should you leave in the mix? That's often argued. For this class, I've let you go at as long as you don't clip, you're fine. A pretty standard rule is 6 to 8 dB of headroom. If you want a rule to live by. Luis, I hope I'm saying that right. You are opening a can of worms. So this has a great thing that it's a can of worms that I'd like to rant about, but it's not going to do any good. So I don't even want to start the rant. But so the question is, when you're working with a writer of music, assuming I mean a lyricist or maybe a melody writer, all this tweaking, would he have to redo his sheet music by the time we finish mixing? If so, do engineers get royalties for the derivative? No. To that last part. As an engineer, a remixer, or anything else, you get nothing for radio play or really anything else. You're not really getting a good source of revenue. What you want to be is to get writer credits, which writer credits don't necessarily mean that you wrote things. There are tons of people in the industry with lots of writing credits that probably have never written a note of music in their life, much less a lyric. And then there's the old change a word, get a third Nashville rule. So yes, if you actually do change words or melodies, then you need to negotiate a writer's credit. As an engineer, if you do that, you're still not getting paid for it. So if you get into that level of engineering where you're doing that with the artist, you really want to try to, and money's important to you, and you think it's going to be a hit, you really want to negotiate those writing credits. I work with some pop people every now and then. It's real just funny kind of the way they do it, because sometimes you just can't tell what goes where, and like, you know, they may be working on an album, and, you know, I may contribute minusculely to like 5 or 6 songs and heavily to one song and then less to some others or things like that. And so, you know, they just try to even it out at the end of the album. They're like, all right, you know, you get writing credit on 2 songs and then this and that, then, you know, the engineering and stuff like that. So it's like, sometimes I look back at it and, you know, it's kind of weird. It's like, well, this isn't really the song I felt like I contributed to. Like, I think I put a lot more to this song, but, you know, they just kind of slap some credits on there and everybody gets their credit. And if you can stay in touch with me, you know, I'll have my email. Now, this is an American thing. Germany pays producer credits. So, like, if you're in Germany and some of these other countries, I'm not sure how all the other European countries work, but I know in some countries, producers do get credit. And on that same token, there's a few things, you know, that bug me with that a little bit. I remember back in the 90s, you know, it's kind of like they're taking advantage of it, kind of wasn't. It was all legal, but nobody knew it. You know, electronic music gets popular every 10 to 15 years or so. It goes through cycles. So you had the 80s, the mid 80s, late 80s, acid house, and then the mid to late 90s, where it got popular again in America. And so you had a lot of major labels were hitting up electronic artists for remixes, or sometimes just finding the remixes, like the bootleg. And they would release these remixes, sometimes even bootlegs of them, as their actual hit on the radio, because it was cool at that time and it received a lot more play. But then the people that did the remix got nothing for that, because they didn't negotiate money for the remix, And then they got mad when there was someone on the station, they got no royalties, but it turns out in America, they're not entitled to any royalties. So they weren't exactly ripped off, they were just ill-advised. Then taking that note a bit further, last fall, I was doing the same sort of lecture like this. I drug in some Apple loops right out of the library in my lecture, probably 30, 40 minutes into the lecture, put them in the track, showed, the processes, put up the video on YouTube, and then some record label comes through and monetizes my YouTube, saying that I copied their song. I go check out the song they got copyright infringement on, and it's because they used the same logic loop. And I had no method to fight this. So they got to monetize my class through policies with Google and YouTube, and I had no ability to fight it, even though it clearly shows that what I did was take an Apple loop, which I have full license to use through Apple, and drug it into Logic and played it back. So even though my video is showing precisely that I did not steal that, and that if anything they did, I had no recourse for it. And that brings up an even larger question. As you can see from what I just showed you here, I could make an entire track completely out of things stock in Logic, just combining these things. So at that point, who wrote it? I didn't write a melody, I didn't write a lyric, but yet I own the entirety of that piece. So in that case, I could try to claim writer credit, but I didn't really write anything. And then what happens if somebody else doesn't use that same loop, but copies the melody? You copyrighted that melody as a part of your song, but you didn't actually write that melody. You got it from a Logic loop that couldn't be done. So this is a whole legal scenario which is going to blow up here sometime, and nobody really knows how it's going to be handled. Welcome to the industry. Notice I do not copyright my webinars. What I got was a copyright infringement claim from that my webinar infringed on their copyright of their music, and then they monetized my page. So Anna, you can use, yes, Apple Loops are licensed for you to use. They are, I forgot the technical name of the license, but yes, you can use Apple Loops in your own personal works. That's what they're there for. That's part of their selling point, is that anybody can open their software and start being a musician to whatever degree. Logic does not get royalties. Logic gets you to buy Macintosh. No, that's the thing about Logic. Logic doesn't own it, and it wasn't Logic that I was in dispute with. It was a record label that had released a track, or actually a whole album, from a guy who actually listened to all his other stuff. He has a whole album of just thrown together Logic loops and different people singing over the top. So they did add lyrics and the melody of the singing, but the singing goes with the loops. So they didn't really quite write the melody either, right? Because the singer's singing along with the melody of a loop. But the fact is that I had no recourse to do it. They had all the recourse against me. If they wanted to launch one more complaint against me, they could have locked out my whole account, and I would no longer be able to upload my videos for students. So I couldn't press it any further or risk getting locked out of my account. But I had no actual recourse to remove their monetization of my video. So what it really made me want to do is every time Logic makes a new update with loops, I wanted to just release them all, combine them in various ways, throw them all in Beatport through some label that I don't care about, and that way I get royalties every time everybody else uses Logic after that. I mean, it's crazy, right? Shalonda, yes, you could be correct. No, you don't have to buy Logic loops. I'm not sure where you're misunderstanding the process here. The Logic loops are there. If you have Logic, you can just download them all. But yeah, that's sort of the state of the industry, and there's a lot of gray area now with all these programs and loop packs and everything else that are being extremely exploited. And it's gotten really weird. And yes, you will if you get into this stuff. I went through a few years where I kind of got like obsessive with loop packs. I wanted to hear what was in every one of them, and there's so many now that you can't keep up. But I tried to keep up with the popular ones and hear what was in them, so I could recognize them when I heard them in songs around me. And you've got stuff in like everything from Nicki Minaj to Skrillex. It's all using stuff like that. So yeah, it goes from your bedroom producer to your major multi-million-dollar pop people are all using these things. Danny asks his best but lyrics of things. One thing guarantee: if you write lyrics, you're getting paid. If your lyrics are being used, you can get paid. And our laws kind of came from that sort of classical, like our laws literally came out of the dark ages of sheet music. And then they just kept trying to find ways to squeeze more money out of it, but they never really adjusted what the definitions of anything were to fit modern production. So, when everything started, like originally in recording, you set up one mic in a room, people played some sheet music, there was your recording. And so it made sense that only the melody and the lyric were copyrighted because that was all that would be on the sheet music, and then everybody else kind of improv'd. These days, your basic melody might be no more complex than Mary Had a Little Lamb, but the whole thing sounds cool because it has a ton of production on it. So you may have a singer-songwriter that worked 30 minutes on something, and then a producer/engineer that worked, 80 hours on it, but that singer-songwriter is going to get the lion's share of the money. And, that's something you should be aware of. So, if you are getting into stuff, try to learn to write. Try to learn to write melodies, and always try to negotiate some sort of writer share if you're working on a project that you think will get radio play. I know I learned the hard way. I had some things that I found out had been getting radio play in different markets of the nation. Not here, so I didn't even know it till later. I found out that we've been getting radio play. I'm like, okay, cool. Where's my royalties? Oh, you didn't get a writer credit on this one. And in that case, the artist didn't even have a writer credit because they didn't write the song. Somebody else had owned the song. It hadn't been released, but it wasn't. So it wasn't technically a cover, but it wasn't their song. So not only did only the people that originally wrote the original song, which sounded nothing like what got released, got paid off all those radio plays. So the artist, nothing. Us producers, engineers, nothing. The guy that did nothing but happened to write the song 20 years ago and we just happened to pick it up, he got that money. Eloise, you don't have to worry about them suing you over using the loops. They can't sue you. The problem is I legally had the right to do it, but Google and YouTube have no cause to actually have to uphold the law because that's not what they do, which is a little tricky because now YouTube plays count towards Billboard hits as well. So they should be forced to kind of start maintaining the same sort of laws and regulation like radio and other things. But they don't. They're too big to really control. And so they make up their own rules and then everybody else plays along. And unfortunately, their rules right now are not very good for the way that music's made. And of course, you'll hear all the people on SoundCloud getting their stuff pulled for different reasons, and that's its own issue too. Well, at least it looks like you are in the best position to be in the business if you can make it. It's the hardest position to make it in, but it's the most rewarding on all sides to be the doing the songwriter and melodies. Melodies, any notes, just the notes. You don't even know who to petition, but yeah, it's You know, it's just the way the business works here in America right now, and it's always subject to change. Um, and it's definitely in need of a change, especially with things like logic. Once you start exploring these logic loops, you're going to hear them everywhere. You'll start hearing them on the hold messages when you're on calling your phone company or whatever. It's weird. Every now and then I think I wrote something because it sounds so familiar. I hear it, I'll be like, oh, did I write that? I'll be like, oh no, that's a logic loop I used in class one day. That's why it sounds familiar. And you realize that somebody got paid, probably very little, but somebody made piles of stuff for a library somewhere, and then those things get selected, they get put out, that person gets paid, and all they did is slap together some loops. So, you know, of course, we're in school, we want you to be flexible artists. We don't want you to be stuck when you run out of loop packs and not be able to make anything. So that's what school's for. So you're not stuck to that. But yeah, it's amazing how far some people get purely off slapping together loops. All right, I think that's enough rambling on that. I actually don't mind rambling more, but that's certainly more than I think anybody watching the video feed is going to want to see. So I'm going to, if there's no other questions about this, about what we're doing, or anything like that, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. And as usual, you can stick around. We can still chat while I'm saving out. All right, let's call this one done. Enjoyed having you all. Have a great future here at Full Sail and beyond.